Hey, soccer fans, welcome back to the Feed the Fire podcast, talking all things Major League Soccer and the Chicago Fire. I'm your host, Nick, and in this episode 66 of Feed the Fire, the times they are a-changin', as the old Bob Dylan song goes, because the MLS has made some big news in unleashing some new initiatives on the public that we weren't exactly expecting, and then they went out and made bigger news by withdrawing from their first teams from the U.S. Open Cup going forward. Some big shakeups here in the American soccer landscape. We're going to talk about all of that. We're also going to touch on Concacaf Champions Cup, the draw that came out, and see what the MLS clubs matchups look like and how far they can go. There's been some coaching hires that we're going to inform everyone about. No, not Frank Lopez. We're done with that. We're not going to talk about that until the games actually start. And also, it was the SuperDraft, MLS SuperDraft. Whatever your opinion is, your team has made some deals and brought in some new talent. We're going to take a look at that, all with the Chicago Fire. So stay tuned. Welcome back once again, Chicago Fire and MLS fans, to the Feed the Fire podcast. As I mentioned, even though it's the offseason, there is a lot that the league is doing, and even a bit that the Chicago Fire are doing, and we're going to talk about all of it tonight. First, though, I want to recognize a few of our new listeners. The show continues to grow, and I thank everyone who's searched for us online or spread the word or shared a link or said, hey, this guy Nick, he's a moron. You should go listen to him. He's pretty entertaining. Whatever it is. Let's continue to grow the Feed the Fire podcast, as well as grow the conversation, grow the sport of soccer and Major League Soccer through conversation here, as well as wherever you get your MLS content. So I want a real quick shout out to Ryan, who found us on Spotify, responded to our online poll. And Ryan did say, love the show. John Donovan, a bit of a downer in the last episode. And Ryan, I'll tell you, John is just a passionate fan. So when things are going well, you can't bring him down. And when things are going poorly, as they seem to have been for the Fire, well, he's gonna reflect that. So continue to tune in for all his takes. Especially, I think we're gonna get him to talk a little bit about this new New England coach in the next episode. Shout out to brother BKL, going back to my Sons of a Pitch soccer days, my original podcast. With my guy Mike, which we did a reunion episode. So go find Sons of a Pitch, Soccer Central, and you just get to see me and Mike reminiscing, talking soccer, reliving some hilarious memories over the course of like 3 or 4 scotches. It's pretty entertaining. Go find Sons of a Pitch, Soccer Central. Also, shout out to PG3, who found the show and connected with me on Twitter, as well as a shout out to an Los Angeles Galaxy podcast, News Across the Galaxy. Nag, thank you guys for keeping me updated with everything in the Western Conference and plugging me in with some great other MLS content producers. So make sure you guys go check them out as well. On one of their last episodes, we were talking about whether Billy Sharp would fit in with the Chicago Fire. They were doing a hot sauce challenge and tasting, and figured to throw him a question about Billy Sharp, since I don't think he's going back to the Galaxy. Anyway, go check all those guys out. Follow along. Continue to grow the show. Thank you, everyone. And now, without further ado, Major League Soccer has introduced a number of new sporting initiatives ahead of the 2024 season. They put out a press release on Thursday the 14th, and I've skimmed through it once. I'm going to give you the meat and potatoes of it, everything you need to know, and give you my reactions to some of these new rules that are going to be taking place. Now, the announcement did say that a lot of these innovations, right? You got to use the good corporate speak here, not changes, not rules, not whatever else you want to call it. These are innovations because we're progressing and we're growing the game and moving it forward and all that good stuff. But these were piloted in MLS Next Pro, and it says the approved initiatives prioritize player health and safety, evolving the game while upholding the integrity of competition. Certainly a lofty ideal there. Let's see if they meet it. So the first new initiative, the off-field treatment rule. The off-field treatment rule allows medical professionals with time to assess and treat players off the field of play in a less pressurized environment. Okay, sounds good. But so do all those ballot initiatives that just raise my taxes. They always sound good. Let's see what else it says. If a player with a suspected injury remains on the ground for more than 15 seconds, the referee will stop play and wave the medical crew onto the field to evaluate the player. When safe, the player will be removed from the field and remain off the field for a minimum of 2 minutes for further assessment and treatment. First implemented in MLS Next Pro midway through 2022 and continued through 2023, the off-field treatment rule has allowed medical staffs time to treat players while also allowing match play to resume quickly. Exceptions to the off-field treatment rule include instances of potential head injury, goalkeeper injury, serious medical events, and fouls resulting in yellow or red cards. All right, so the idea here is sound. They want to speed up the pace of play and stop players from delaying the game due to faking injury, or they want to make sure that someone who really is hurt gets medical treatment as quickly as possible. So I think it's excellent idea, and I think we have seen this part of the game, this gamesmanship, the dark arts, if you will, really start to rear its head in Major League Soccer. And we start to see it too. I wonder if here's another little piece of the equation here. Is Leagues Cup and some of these CONCACAF games played under MLS rules? Because if so, this is going to really hamper some of the Liga MX and Central American clubs who will stall and stall and stall and stall and stall some more against MLS opposition. I wonder if this will ever make its way into CONCACAF generally, and kind of benefit Major League Soccer and American teams. But aside from that, looking at the particular announcement, and again, I'm not reading the language of the law or the new rule here. I'm reading what was in the press release here. I'm curious as to who's going to count those 15 seconds. It says, if a player with a suspected injury remains on the ground for more than 15 seconds, the referee will stop play. So who's counting that? Is that on the referee to count? Is that on VAR to count? Is that on the fourth official? Is that on the treatment staff themselves? Who's going to be counting for those 15 seconds? And is it really going to get to the point where maybe an opposing coach is saying, that was 17 seconds, he should have been off by now? Or is the home team coach going to say, it was only 13 seconds. We got 2 more seconds before he has to come off the field. Why'd you blow the play dead? He was getting up, kind of a thing, right? And again, is that going to be a referee to referee thing? Is the guy on his knee and standing? Is he going to let it go? There's still a lot of judgment call in here. But the whole idea is to keep players from faking injury, to delay the game. And if they have to be off the field for 2 minutes at a minimum, just by going down 15 seconds, I really do think that will deter some players from staying down on the ground a bit too long. I do like the exceptions to head injuries, goalkeeper injuries, serious medical events. Fouls resulting in yellow or red cards. Yeah, if the referee is going to blow the play dead and issue a yellow or red, let the medical staff come on. I don't think that would have any effect there. So I think this is a pretty good rule. Let's just see if it's implemented consistently by the referees here. Next rule, timed substitution rule. Maximizing effective match time, the time substitution rule requires that a substituted player exit the field within 10 seconds. Failure to exit from any point on the field within 10 seconds will cause the incoming player to wait 60-second holding period before entering the game at the next stoppage. During the holding period and prior to the substitute entering, the team will play down a player. Exceptions to the rule include injury and goalkeeper subs. This was enacted in MLS Next Pro in 2023, and it says 99.7% of the substitutions were completed in 10 seconds or less, and that was out of a sample size of 3,200 substitutions, according to this article. So again, similar in principle to the prior rule that they want to speed up the game, and even not necessarily speed it up, but keep the tempo moving and not have these time-wasting tactics be implemented by teams and players. So players got 10 seconds to get subbed out. Otherwise, the player can't come in for another minute, and that team will play a man down. And again, exceptions for goalkeepers and injury substitutions. So the one thing I think about here is who's going to keep track of the 10 seconds. If there's a player who's already by a touchline, like if people are setting up, say, for a goal kick or a corner kick, and everyone's by the touchline, and that player's getting subbed out, can he just stand on the, like, right next to the touchline or the end line and then just count to 9 and then hop out? Like, is that going to be a 9-second burn of time? Because 10 seconds, that's when you get penalized. So I just wonder who's going to count that. How are they going to really enforce the intent of that if someone tries to play that little bit of gamesmanship? And yeah, like the other thing I wonder is if captains are coming out and exchanging armbands and things like that. That makes me wonder if they're going to be allowed to have that time, because I do believe wearing an armband is also a rule by the league for captains, or a player has to be designated as such. Someone has to do it, right? So if you have kind of two conflicting rules here, I would hate to see a dude have to sprint across the pitch to hand off an armband and then sprint to the end line and then be assessed a 1-minute penalty. So I hope that this has all been worked out with MLS Next Pro. It sounds like it has, at least in the sense that this article is promoting the 99.7% success rate here. A couple other smaller announcements. In-stadium VAR announcements. Everyone's favorite thing, VAR. So pending IFAB, International Football Association Board approval, and IFAB is the board that puts out all the laws of the game. So if you ever are curious as to what the actual letter of the law of any of this says, go find the IFAB, the International Football Association Board's website, and look up laws of the game. So pending their approval, VAR decisions will be announced by the referee to fans in the stadium and viewers at home. So we already see this overseas. We see in the Premier League that it's put up on the board, and that there may be announcement of it. This is kind of, in my mind, the NFLization of Major League Soccer. We know the league wants to imitate their success, but I don't know if I'm going to be a fan of them imitating the referees, having to stand there and say, attention, this was the call on the field, this is what VAR about. I hope they can avoid that and actually go the hockey route. I love hockey referees who are just like, 2 minutes hooking number 21, and then he just skates away. Like, I hope that's what happens, and that way it's done. Next rule here, next initiative here, the stoppage time clock. Scoreboard, video boards, and other stadium clocks will run until the completion of each half, including any additional time at the end of either the first or second half. For example, 95:04. I'm a big fan of this as a spectator and a fan of the game, that you're not just going to see it go 90 minutes and then you're just kind of like, okay, where are we at with stoppage time? What's going on? We can see it when we're sitting at home on the couch and you see the clock kind of continue to run on the broadcast. But as a spectator in the stands, this is big. For players on the field, this is big. I think this is positive. If you guys know of any drawbacks, please let me know. DM me on Twitter at GlassHouseSoccer or email me glasshouseSoccer@gmail.com. I don't see any drawbacks to letting the clock run in the stadium. Next initiative, return to play equity. Opposing players that simultaneously incur head injuries requiring off-field treatment who are subsequently cleared to return to play will return to the game at the same time once both medical evaluations have been completed. Now, this one's interesting, and I get the spirit of it, that they're wanting it to be fair. If two players go down with a head injury at the same time, they're taken off the field, they're treated, they have to return at the same time. So it doesn't give a player an advantage to hurry up and get back on the field before his opponent does, when there's simultaneous head injuries. I get it because it's equity and they want to keep it fair. I get it because they don't want teams rushing players back and making sure they're evaluated and treated properly. But there's always the chance that this rule is used nefariously. Maybe that's too strong of a word, but with some gamesmanship where it's like, hey, treatment staff, take 7 minutes to do a full evaluation and the other player can't come in. So I wonder if there's going to be any of that kind of gamesmanship on the opposite end of the spectrum. And, it's 11 v 11. You're allowed up to 11 players. You're almost taking away, I don't want to say taking away of an advantage because the whole idea is equity here, but you're almost taking away, like penalizing a team who's actually trying to play by the rules. What if there's a substitution, right? Does that affect it? If my player goes out with a head injury in, the 85th minute, I'll just sub a guy in. Does that substitute still have to wait for the other like, to me, that really doesn't make sense, because that has nothing to do with player safety. It is all a rule of equity. At least that's the way the league's looking at it. So this one, I'm not 100% behind. I'm probably 50-50 on it, just because there's still some particular instances that I think could really negate the spirit of this rule. There are also some roster and budget guideline updates. Did I say roster? Roster. Here's the new roster initiative, discovery slot reduction. Beginning after the 2024 roster compliance date, MLS will reduce the number of discovery slots per club from 7 players to 5. San Diego FC, the new expansion team, will maintain 7 through 2024, through the 2025 roster compliance date, and then they will get reduced to 5. So they're reducing the discovery slots, meaning you can't, when you identify a player domestically or abroad, you can put him on your discovery list, meaning you get first crack at signing him if he ever wants to come to MLS. And they're just reducing the number of players, which I think that's a good thing, because you had teams doing things like, and maybe it worked out for Inter Miami, like just throwing Ronaldo, Messi, Mbappe, Griezmann, just putting them on their discovery lists, just in the off chance that any of these guys might show up. Rather, it wasn't being used for the purpose of trying to find maybe like a young up-and-coming talent or a local kid that you wanted to keep in your system or keep in your first team eventually. Academies and homegrooms kind of, got rid of that idea. But I think the teams were not using it for its intended purpose, and that's why they're reducing it. General allocation money for DP transfers. Here's something that could impact some teams. Following the transfer of a designated player who meets the TAM, targeted allocation money eligibility parameters, a club may now elect to receive a portion of transfer fees as GAM, general allocation money. Previously, any transfer or loan received from a DP could not be assigned as GAM. So essentially, when you transferred out your designated player and you got a fee in return, it had to go back into player fees, targeted allocation money. Now, a portion of that can be general allocation money, meaning you can, yes, use it to sign players and pay their fees and salaries, or it can be reinvested within your organization. So, or used to buy international slots, or used to do other sorts of quirky MLS roster type stuff. It doesn't have to just go to player salaries. So, this gives a little bit more financial flexibility. Residency deadline. Here's the final initiative that was announced. Residency deadline. For a player to be considered a domestic player in the applicable season, residency must be established, or the player has to have appeared for an immigrant visa interview by the opening of the secondary transfer window. So this one is just kind of firming up, especially with the way roster spots are traded and moved around, international spots, etc. Within MLS. This is just kind of firming up this rule and making sure that domestic players are in fact domestic players. Wow, a lot of new initiatives, a lot of things that you're going to be hearing on broadcasts over the first month of the season and the preseason to get everyone familiar with it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't seem like these initiatives are changing the fundamental purpose or the fundamental aspects of the game. What makes soccer soccer? What makes Major League Soccer Major League Soccer? That these are kind of cutting down and addressing some of the fringe issues and the annoying things from gamesmanship and from a fan's perspective, as well as helping out some of the front offices with a little flexibility, financial flexibility. So I think these are overall good initiatives, and they've worked at the MLS Next Pro level. They've been tested here with the clubs, with the referees. So it sounds like, it'll be hard to argue truly against any of these initiatives. And it's not like they, revamped the whole rule book. All right. That covers the big news of the new initiatives. Now, dramatic pause, lowering my voice, lowering my pitch here, onto the bigger news, or the biggest news of the week. MLS has announced that it will not send its first teams to US Open Cup. I will repeat that. MLS will not be sending its first teams to the US Open Cup. And there were a lot of reasons for it. There were a lot of crazy reactions to it. here's a few reactions that I saw online. First of all, people saying it's just proof the MLS is trying to kill the competition and that they only want money. Well, real quick, just to address that and be done with it. Yeah, duh, of course they're trying to kill the competition. That's what businesses do. This isn't a novel or a wild take. For the last 25 years, MLS has done everything they can to be top dog in American soccer. Like, this even goes back to the founding of the league being granted Division I status over all the other leagues that were there at the time. So this isn't a new thing. This isn't a hot take or a new idea, and you're not edgy because you're saying MLS is out to kill the rest of the competition. No, this has been going on. This is fine. The other thing, look at the NFL. The NFL had to merge with the AFL, and then has killed 3 or 4 other leagues over the last 30 some years or so that have tried to start up as a rival to it. And they've even killed college football to a certain degree by making college football their academies, if you will, their development league. Like, the NFL has it all. Okay. So MLS, I've said it before in this episode, that MLS is modeling their league after the NFL because of its huge success. So why not go out there, try to be the biggest, the baddest, the most influential, the most rich, and the most wealthy income league out there? Why not go for it? So that's kind of my quick reaction on that. Don't be surprised and don't be upset with MLS for it. Another reaction is there's no respect for tradition. And I think that's, a valid take to a certain extent. The U.S. Open Cup is the oldest soccer competition in the country, the oldest national competition, I want to say, in the country. It was I believe, the second or third longest consecutive running soccer tournament in the world prior to COVID stopping it for a year or two. There is history here. The history of soccer in the United States is exemplified by the U.S. Open Cup. All those early East Coast or California teams made up of ethnic groups. Like, some of the teams were called the Greeks or the Maccabees, right? These were the names of the teams, and the ethnic population, the immigrants who brought the sport and really made it part of the American culture in its early days, were recognized by the U.S. Open Cup, or that was their biggest goal, to play in and do well and even win the U.S. Open Cup. So Major League Soccer is getting away from that history and getting away from that tradition. Now, on the other hand, MLS doesn't owe it to anyone to preserve history. They're looking out for number one, right? They're looking out for themselves and their own history. So it kind of falls on U.S. Soccer now to really make sure that history is preserved. And sadly, part of the reason that MLS did this is because U.S. Soccer really didn't make the U.S. Open Cup into anything these big clubs would want to put their resources and time and player health and safety on the line for. So you can blame MLS all you want, but they're not the only ones at fault for this decision. U.S. Soccer. Also, the other criticism and take is, you're losing the opportunity for cup sets or the David versus Goliath matchups. You're taking that excitement away from the fans. You're taking away that excitement and thrill from the players. Guys who, like the Chicago House here, Midwest Premier League, got to play against Chicago Fire first team players last year. That's a big moment for them. Not just it wasn't about winning or losing. They get to play against the top dog. They get to play against the number one league, and they get to go toe to toe with them, right? Really measure themselves and enjoy those moments. Those are gone. Now, I will say we're probably going to find a lot more excitement and in other competitions, and in the new iteration of U.S. Open Cup minus MLS first teams, there are still going to be cup sets. There are still going to be David versus Goliath, right? If you think about whichever MLS Next Pro team won that tournament, or maybe has an MLS first teamer doing a rehab stint or kind of doing some load management, moving down to that team, you'll get to see him appear, and there's still kind of be some of that. But honestly, as fans, we're going to find excitement. We're going to find stuff to cheer for. The other reaction on the flip side of it is like, good, let the MLS go on and build more meaningful competition. this is definitely the minority take here from what I've seen online. And maybe that's just because people online love to hate on MLS and American soccer. But yeah, to put a positive spin on it, MLS, yeah, don't let your first team guys that you're paying, millions of dollars to, or in the case of the Chicago Fire, paying over $8 million to Xherdan Shaqiri to go have him trot out against Chicago House or Union Omaha, right? So let these top players focus on the MLS season, on Leagues Cup, which sanctioned by Concacaf sanctioned tournament, not the U.S. Open Cup isn't, but Concacaf sanctioned tournament. Let them focus on some of this big stuff here. And with the expanded Club World Cup and the MLS having the opportunity to get a few teams into the Club World Cup, let me change the emphasis, into the Club World Cup, right? Really expand MLS's footprint and influence across the globe. You want to have those guys focused on those things instead of US Open Cup. Do I agree? Not 100%. Is it a reason? Absolutely. Okay, some of the other kind of takes out here. And yeah, I know I'm kind of giving like my reaction to the reaction, but when I heard the news, I was so bummed out about it because yeah, I wanted to continue it. And change is scary, guys. Let's be honest. But I wanted to see these first teams competing in the U.S. Open Cup in this tournament format, and I think it in a lot of aspects, the U.S. Open Cup, the final 3 rounds is better than most of the Leagues Cup, or some Leagues Cup at least, right? Leagues Cup was all about Messi. That's what it was. I think he played more Leagues Cup games than MLS games, or I don't know, maybe somewhere around the same. But that's where the bulk of his time in Inter Miami so far has been spent playing in Leagues Cup games. So it's definitely about that for Major League Soccer. Let me get into some other takes and things. Like I said, I know I'm kind of giving a reaction to the reaction here, but that's the discourse, right? That's how you have a conversation. A lot of people are saying that this is not good for the growth of the game in the United States, MLS pulling their first teams out. And I understand your point. I get where you're coming from. But don't phrase it as if it's some sort of corporate obligation or corporate social responsibility for Major League Soccer to grow the game in the United States. No, their obligation is to their investors. It's a business. And I know that might be a lazy take of mine or an obvious take, but the onus to grow soccer in the United States is on U.S. Soccer, the U.S. Soccer Federation, not on Major League Soccer, their league. Like, you want to compare Major League Soccer to other leagues all the time. Like, let's compare it to the Premiership. Is it their job to prepare English players and grow the sport? Well, the sport has grown so much, maybe it's an apples to oranges comparison. But at the same time, no, they're not preparing. They're not trying to go around and like set up clubs in every town and grow the sport in their country. They're there for their biggest clubs to make the biggest money and to have the biggest global influence. And that's how MLS has grown right now. And again, getting back to the fact that this should be U.S. Soccer Federation's job to grow the sport in the United States. They should have been, first of all, working better with Major League Soccer, and they probably did see this coming. There probably were conversations about it, but they should have been working hand in hand with them, and they should have been growing the U.S. Open Cup then. A lot of people have compared the prize money of the U.S. Open Cup to that of Leagues Cup, supposedly, and I haven't verified the numbers, that the total amount of money given out to Leagues Cup clubs was $70 million, as opposed to $2 million in the U.S. Open Cup. And the U.S. Open Cup, the team that wins only gets $300,000. So U.S. Soccer really should have upped the purse there, or done something to appease the MLS and keep them involved, and then work hand in hand to grow it, right? Here's where I will rip on MLS regarding this decision. One of the reasons, and probably one of the biggest reasons they cited for pulling their first teams out of the U.S. Open Cup, was schedule congestion. There's too much load on these players' legs. Now, schedule congestion is a global issue, but I'm calling the MLS out on this one because they actually created the Leagues Cup themselves and then claimed that there's schedule congestion. So they have contributed to their own reason for leaving their first teams out of the U.S. Open Cup. Additionally, alternatives to schedule congestion for the league could have been raise the salary cap, expand roster rules and availability, things of that nature. Address your roster rules, address how you literally structure your team here with players and heck, man, we used to have guest players in my youth tournaments. Like maybe have like a tournament squad or something. Get creative with it, right? Like there's other things that the league could have done that weren't as drastic as withholding their teams from their first teams from the U.S. Open Cup. Another thing I will say, even by doing this, Major League Soccer is going to encounter the same issue that every league has with their domestic tournament. Some teams are going to prioritize the domestic tournament. Some teams, here we'll put it in MLS context, some MLS clubs may prioritize U.S. Open Cup with their next pro team and make sure that those teams are ready for it. Some MLS clubs are going to prioritize the League's Cup at the expense of the regular season / supporter shield, Concacaf Champions League, or they were going to prioritize Concacaf Champions Cup, or they're going to prioritize the playoffs. Like, think if you were, Atlanta United this year, or even the Columbus Crew, I know they won it, you're sitting in that 4 to 6 spot. You're not going to win the supporter shield. But you want to be ready to go and healthy for the playoffs. You're not going to put all your eggs into the League's Cup basket and risk getting somebody hurt, especially depending on where you're going to play, how long that drags out, whatever. You're going to manage your players' loads throughout the regular season and League's Cup. Just treat it all as one extended season. Maybe that's what the MLS wants. Treat it all as one season so you can extend it. So you're still going to have teams do that. There's still going to be teams that I think won't take League's Cup as serious, especially if they're doing well in the regular season. But I will say MLS clubs also, there's another criticism of Major League Soccer clubs, they need to figure out how to use their next pro teams. Speaking from a Chicago Fire perspective, we saw how the Chicago Fire did not know how to use this second team. You had a guy like Wyatt Almsberg who could give the first team quality minutes, who did last season, played pretty darn well, enough where they picked up his option, right? He was floundering in the second team. Like, why is this veteran defender playing against teenagers down in MLS Next Pro? It's not doing too much for his development. He should be with the first team. Now, I get they brought up Kendall Burks and they sent Olmsberg down and tried Burks out, but still, Burks is a completely different story, and you've heard it on this podcast before. But still, you have the Chicago Fire coaching staff and front office did not know how to manage they barely knew how to manage one roster. Let's be honest. They couldn't figure out their senior team, let alone how to manage 2 rosters. So clubs need to do a much better job with this. On top of it, the Chicago Fire were looking for offense all season, and not once did they give their second team player the opportunity to come up and start and get some minutes with the first team in an MLS match. So until these clubs can use their MLS Next Pro teams better, I don't think pulling their first team out of the U.S. Open Cup is gonna do much. Maybe it will force them to have to emphasize their MLS Next Pro team, but remains to be seen. Only time will tell. There's also the legal arguments that have been put forth that the top tier 1 Division 1 league must participate in the U.S. Open Cup. Well, technically, the Next Pro teams are part of the clubs, are part of the Division 1 MLS clubs. So MLS technically meets that rule by sending their MLS Next Pro teams. And this comes back to 2 things. Number 1, MLS is a closed system. So these kind of rules forcing clubs to play in their domestic tournaments don't really apply. And there's some articles out there online about it. And in fact, FIFA, there was a ruling back when Miami FC sued FIFA and MLS, alleging that they're violating FIFA rules and they're monopolistic and all that sort of thing. That it actually was part of the decision and part of the evidence that FIFA's like, no, this doesn't apply to MLS. We know they're a closed system, whatever. Additionally, when MLS started MLS Next Pro and had all all these affiliate teams, there was a concern that you would get multiple teams within one ownership or within one club structure playing each other in U.S. Open Cup and potentially, ruining the equity and, fair play and all those sort of things. So they said that MLS Next Pro teams couldn't participate if your first team also participated. So having already set that precedent, MLS is within the legal rules here, unless there's something that comes out of left field. And honestly, these things don't happen overnight, right? Like, you see in every other legal context that as soon as a law gets passed, the lawsuit challenging it is filed next day, right? There should have been quick action by U.S. Soccer and the U.S. Open Cup. They probably knew this was coming, and they knew there's really not much they can do about it. In some, don't get me wrong here. I'm disappointed we're not going to see the first teams competing for another trophy. I understand why MLS did it, even if they weren't well thought out reasons or reasons created themselves. But at the end of the day, is this the evolution of soccer in America? Is this the next step? Yeah, probably. And hopefully it just creates waves and ripples to only strengthen MLS as a league and build up further the U.S. Open Cup in some way. It doesn't seem like it now, but maybe in some way in the future, we're going to see a more competitive U.S. Open Cup. And again, this was what MLS supporters of this decision were saying, is that a non-U.S. Open or a non-MLS club has only been to the finals 2, maybe 3 times in the last 25 years or so, and they've only won it once. Thank you, 99 Rochester Rhinos. So it's not typical. It's not typical. Maybe this will bring some competition back to the competition. Anyway, now before we transition to the break, let me give you a quick tinfoil hat theory that with all of this going on, all these shakeups, all these new rules, all this pulling out of U.S. soccer stuff, etc., MLS might be setting itself up to eventually just break away from any sort of affiliation and start its own massive Super League. Oh, I said it. I said Super League. Oh my goodness. A North American or Western hemispherical Super League. That's my tinfoil hat. And it's just going to dominate the Western world of soccer. Or at the very least, MLS is going to grow so much, do its own thing. It's going to maintain its closed system, but then within its own MLS closed system, have separate tiers, promotion, relegation, or geographic divisions inside of it, or its own MLS tournaments. So there's my tinfoil hat, something to check back in on in 20 years or so. Guys, this is a long episode. I appreciate you sticking with me. I want to take a moment right now to recognize our sponsor, Skira Icelandic Spring Water. Icelandic for clear. Skira water comes from a spring in a government-protected nature preserve in Iceland with naturally low mineral content. This isn't your average water. Clearly, pun intended, it's one of the best. And Skira water, first of all, any water in Iceland, phenomenal. Skira water, top of the top. Their slogan is a pun. Me, as a 39-year-old dad, totally have it. And if I'm going to keep talking about soccer for 45 plus minutes, probably by the time this episode's over, maybe closer to 55 minutes, having a bottle of Skira right afterwards just refreshes me, gets the throat back to where it needs to be to take on all my litigious claimants in my insurance practice later. So go out to your local 7-Eleven, your nearest 7-Eleven, buy a couple, 3, 4 bottles, have it with you at your holiday party, pour it into a pitcher, and then do one of those crazy reveals where everyone's like, ooh, this is wonderful water here, quality water here. Is it from the tap? Why, no, it's Skira Icelandic spring water. And let everyone ooh and ah over how cultured you are by having international bottled water. Again, available at your local 7-Eleven. Thank you, Skira, for all your support of the show. Now, the second half, I said we're going to talk about coaching. We're going to talk about the SuperDraft, and then Concacaf Champions Cup. I'm going to cram it all in here, and we even got one other special announcement as well. Chicago Fire's SuperDraft took place today, December 19th. I love the SuperDraft. People say you should get rid of it. I think that's stupid. First of all, drafts unique to the United States, and I love it as our American soccer league. I want it. I want to keep it. I think it's fantastic for that. Also, why would you limit yourself to the ways you can get players? The SuperDraft, the players come to you as a club. The Chicago Fire aren't going to send scouts to every single college division. Like, the logistics of scouting and player identification in the United States is crazy. So having this draft and then having one or two scouts focus specifically in on the players in the draft and in the college landscape, it's fantastic. Never limit the way you can obtain talent. That'd just be stupid. Like, I think about it as a former HR manager. Cast your net as wide as possible, right? You want to cast a wide net when you are looking to bring talent into your organization. Keep the SuperDraft. I love it. And the Chicago Fire, with their first pick in the first round, they picked 6th overall, selected Brian Dowd, goalkeeper, Notre Dame. He came up with the Fire Academy. I looked at some of his tape from that the SuperDraft put out, that MLS put out for today. And as Andrew Wiebe said on the broadcast, he is ready to play. This guy, you could start him in an MLS match tomorrow, and he would perform. By the way, Notre Dame, all the way to the College Cup, to the finals, losing 2-1 to Clemson. So kudos to Notre Dame on a phenomenal season, and then getting your goalkeeper drafted by his hometown club, by his academy youth club. So congrats to Brian Dowd, congrats to Notre Dame, congrats to the Fire, who get another quality goalkeeper. Like, they're really going all in on we're the club for goalkeepers. So this could be 4 goalkeepers on the roster, with Brady, Spencer Ritchie, Jeff Gall, and now Brian Dowd. So let the speculation begin. Where are they going to transfer Chris Brady? Or are they going to transfer Ritchie or Gall somewhere? And on top of it, there's a couple of Chicago Fire youth players, a couple of U17s who are excellent goalkeepers who've been playing with the U.S. youth national teams at that level as well. So the Chicago Fire have a glut of goalkeepers. This could be something to look for as far as transfers and as far as trade chips. So keep your eye on that. Now, the Fire also had a 2nd-round pick. They selected 6th in the 2nd round, 35th overall. They selected Jason Shokaluk. And I apologize to Jason if I'm mispronouncing that last name. He's a forward from Akron. The Akron Zips, a top American soccer program, top college soccer program, no doubt about that. The 3rd round, the Fire selected 6th and 14th, so 64th and 72nd overall. They selected Lawrence Wooten, a midfielder out of Ohio State. I do like my Big Ten soccer players. And Shane DeFlores, a midfielder out of Stanford. And he came out in his junior year here, it says. So some quality we know. And also, as much as I like my Big Ten soccer players, because I think the Big Ten is an excellent soccer conference, and, you know, being from the Midwest, going to the University of Illinois, even though they didn't have a varsity soccer team, I'm a little biased for that, but I think there is just excellent talent here in the Midwest. But then you gotta look at California when you can play every day of the year. And Stanford has definitely put out its more than fair share of talent into the MLS. So those are the Chicago Fire picks. Goalkeeper Brian Dowd, forward Jason Shokaluk, midfielder Lawrence Wooten, and midfielder Shane DeFlores. By the way, the Chicago Fire traded $50,000 in general allocation money to Atlanta for a 2nd and 3rd round pick. So for $50,000, you get 2 reserve players. There's a little bit of value properties for you there if you're trying to see how things will shake out. We've seen general allocation money and trades go up for players, you know, from senior squad to senior squad, first team to first team, but it doesn't look like that has kind of trickled down yet to these SuperDraft picks. People still trying to figure out what their dollar value is. And if you're a person who follows international roster spots, 3 of those 4 draft picks are domestic players, are Americans, and it is Lawrence Wooten from Ohio State, who actually is a Brit. He's from England. So 1 international roster spot taken up there should he make the first team. Transitioning to Concacaf Champions Cup. Let's talk about another big tournament that continues to grow as MLS retracts from US Open Cup. It is growing with Concacaf Champions Cup here, a new iteration of the Concacaf Club Tournament. It has expanded the number of teams. How many we got here? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, 26 teams, 27 teams, 26 teams. There's a lot of teams here, and I am too tired to count as I record this beautiful Tuesday evening. So as far as MLS teams go, here are their draws. Philadelphia Union draw Deportivo Saprissa. I believe that's the Costa Rican club. That should be an excellent matchup. Saprissa has been a representative from Costa Rica to the Champions League many, many times. They are no stranger to this tournament. They're no stranger to MLS matchups. And am I misremembering things? Did Philly play Saprissa at a tournament not too long ago? I'll have to go look that one up. But that's Philadelphia's first matchup. And as good as Saprissa is for a Central American team, I still think we give the Union the edge here. We know how hard they are to play, especially in a tournament. And they should advance on to play Pachuca from Liga MX. And that's probably a pretty good matchup for Philly as well. And honestly, if they beat Pachuca, they'll end up playing the winner of Toluca, Herediano, or Robin Hood. Honestly, Philly's got a really good path to the semifinals there, guys. That's one team to watch. Now, that's the top left part of the bracket. The bottom left of the bracket has the New England Revolution in it. They are matched up in their first round with Independiente. Gosh, I am racking my brain right now to try to remember what country Independiente is from. Independiente. Let's do a little quick Google search in here. Doesn't look like the logo like I remember it. But this Independiente is from Argentina. That's the quick Google search. That's the big club. I don't think they'd be playing in the CONCACAF one. No, the full name, CA Independiente de la Chorrera, is a club from, everything's in Spanish. All the results are in Spanish. Panama. How could I not remember Panama? So again, a club that has history and tradition within the CONCACAF tournaments, within Champions League. They've had matchups against MLS teams. But again, where MLS is as a league, yes, talent and money and resources and U.S. and all that sort of thing. But now that MLS is saying we're taking our first teams out of the U.S. Open Cup and focusing on other stuff, that's a much more pressure on these teams to win and do well in this tournament. New England should win. They've got, let's drop the news here. They've got their new head coach, Caleb Porter, coming in to take over the reins. With a few signings, they should have some tournament success. So they'll play Independiente. Assuming they win that, they will play Alajuelense. And then most likely will play Club America or Chivas Guadalajara in the quarterfinals there. Chivas is getting to play Forge FC from the CPL, the Canadian Premier League. And they should advance there. Now, looking at the right side of the bracket, the top right, we have our first MLS versus MLS matchup. And this is the unfair draw here, because you have Houston playing St. Louis City in the first round. Winner goes on to play the Columbus Crew. Winner goes on to play most likely Tigres, unless somehow the Whitecaps beat Tigres or Orlando City beats Tigres. So you have 5 MLS teams in that quarter of the bracket. So is MLS going to get a team into the quarterfinals and semifinals as a result of it? Maybe. Or is Tigres going to end up beating 1, 2, 3, possibly 4 MLS clubs on the way to another Continental Club title? If you want to look on the bottom half of the bracket, Monterrey is the giant there. They start off against Comunicaciones and will likely play FC Cincinnati, who's matched up with Cavalier. And I can't remember if that's the Jamaican club or not, because there's a Cavalry FC, but I feel like that is from the CPL, from the Canadian Premier League. And then also in that bracket, that bottom right half portion of the bracket, Nashville FC starts off against Mocha FC. Haven't heard of them. Going to have to look them up. And assuming Nashville wins, they will go on to play Inter Miami. So you've got 3 MLS clubs in that quarter of the bracket. You have 8 MLS clubs on that half. And on the flip side, you have 2 MLS clubs. So interesting draw for Major League Soccer clubs. But as we know, Vancouver gets in from their Canadian Championship, not from any MLS qualifying. Since we touched on Nashville, there is a rumor that Hani Mukhtar is going to be transferred to a club in the Bundesliga. It's escaping me which club it is right now, but there was a rumor that there were talks going on there, so something to keep an eye on. So that's the matchup, guys. This is crazy. With 8 MLS clubs on one half of the bracket, it's possible MLS gets a team in the finals. With Philadelphia, with kind of the hardest teams, but from not as much of the league with Saprissa and then Pachuca. I don't know. We could see an all MLS matchup in the first ever iteration of the Concacaf Champions Cup. That would be amazing. All right, I've kind of stuttered around this bracket enough. Go look it up. Go check it out. We'll talk about it more as the dates draw near and as the clubs finalize their rosters. We talked about the New England new head coach, Caleb Porter. John Donovan is going to talk about that next week. I'm sure he is, because I'm sure he's going to talk about Caleb Porter himself, but also how the Fire should have done a better job in their coaching search. Enough said. Also, Orlando City have signed their former coach, well, most recently coach, to a new 2-year deal, Oscar Pereja. I only say former coach because he was out of contract. They got him a new deal, 2 years. Again, another person who I know John Donovan would have loved to see the Chicago Fire just throw a bag of money at and get him here to Chicago. But he remains with Orlando City for another 2 years. One final comment. I promise I'll wrap up after this. We're almost at an hour here. There is a new soccer club in the Chicagoland area, or it's an FC, so a new football club in the Chicagoland area, based in Aurora, in Kane County, out in southwest suburbs here, right? Called River Light FC. They will be playing their first season in 2024 with USL 2, and they'll also have a women's team playing in USL Women's, and eventually they would like to have their women's team make that jump to the USL Women's Super League. And eventually they are going to want their USL 2 team to make the jump to the USL Championship, hopefully USL 1 in a shorter period of time. I know this because I had a wonderful conversation with one of their co-founders and general manager, Heather Bickerton, a phenomenal person. So much energy, like her good vibes and her positivity and her energy were coming through the phone. I saw their website. I reached out and I said, hey, how can I get involved with River Light FC, with a new club in the suburbs? And hopefully I get to have kind of an in-person meeting with her, maybe do some content creation for them, maybe do some broadcasting play-by-play type stuff with them. So please, everyone, go out and check out River Light FC, Chicago suburbs, new USL team. And give them a watch, give them a support. Their season ticket deposits are starting at $25. Additionally, they said that their goal is starting in USL 2 is to really keep some of the top college soccer players from the area playing and in shape and working with their team, and then eventually helping some of these guys find a pathway to the pros, to the USL Championship, maybe to MLS, maybe to some leagues overseas as well. So an excellent vision, excellent game plan, tons of energy. But also, Heather told me she and her ownership group watched the Chicago Fire closely over the last couple of years and watched the Chicago Fire miss out on so many marketing and fan recruitment opportunities, community engagement things, that they know they can build a big following and a strong supporter base for this USL 2 team very quickly, and just have it launch all sorts of good things for soccer in the suburbs. So check out River Light FC. Go find Heather and all of their leadership online. Give them a follow so you can stay up to date with it. And hey, maybe one day you'll hear my voice coming from one of their official accounts. And with that, we are going to wrap episode 66 of the Feed the Fire podcast. Thanks to everyone who listened. Follow, like, subscribe, share, grow the channel, grow the podcast, grow the sport. And as always, let's go Fire.